Thank you for joining us today. My name is William Yu, and
Oh yeah, I'm Edwin. We're GYP board members.
yeah. So thank you for joining us today in the afternoon for those of you in America, and of course in the evening for George, as he is in Sudan, I believe. And so today's event is called African Cultural Day, and this is a part of the 2025 GYP Youth Humanitarian Film Festival, and it's the first of several events which will happen throughout this week. And yesterday we had an opening event about the film festival and the awards given out to those participants. And I'll give my mic to Edwin, who will talk about what we did over the summer.
Thank you, William. So over the summer, we researched, did outreach, and organized the event in like the following timeline. So generally, from late June, we began brainstorming ideas about how the event would be conducted. Like we thought about like potential interviewees, whether we should have a presentation or not, that sort of stuff. And from early mid to July, we began researching on literature, historical sources, and the countries themselves. And we also began looking for potential interviewees. So from mid to late July, we shifted from research on North Africa to outreach to speakers. We also introduced the aspect of film to our African Culture Month. And from early to mid-August, we continued work on organizing the event with further outreach. And from mid to late August to now, we managed to like clean up and sort out all the details. And eventually we got to now. Thanks. And today's session will be about an hour long, and the goal is to promote intercultural understanding through film, conversation, and storytelling. And to get a rough outline for today, this is the agenda. So to start things off, we'll play a short video introducing this event and recapping yesterday's opening ceremony, which was the award ceremony for winners of the film festival competition.
Yeah.
William?
Yeah, and after the video, we'll be joined by two guests, Ekwa Msangi and George Omar Nalo, and they'll discuss African culture and the connection between film and cultural identity. And together they'll talk about how cinema like reflects the diversity, traditions, and evolving stories of Africa. And they have around 10 to 15 minutes of talking about whatever they want to. So it could be ranging from culture, food, film, anything, just anything that you want to talk about that relates to African culture. And so looking ahead, tomorrow we'll have a one-on-one interview with Wesley Wong, and he is a Harvard student and winner of the 2023 All-American High School Film Festival Award. And he'll be sharing his journey in filmmaking, what inspires his passion and his experiences at Harvard. And that is just one of the many events which will be part of this film festival. And to add on to what Edwin said earlier about what we did over the summer, we made a presentation about African culture and filmmaking intertwined with it. However, that presentation is very long. It's like 40 minutes of presentation. So we won't be having that today. But if you guys are interested, you guys can look on our website, which we will later upload the presentation and talk about that. And so without further ado, we will play the short video introducing GYP in this event. Mr. Wong?
Okay. Global Youth Philanthropy Award, GYP for short, we are an international student-led initiative that aims to empower young fellow to engage in humanitarianism and philanthropy. We help students engage in social impact, cultural exchange, and community action. And in the past 2 years, we've participated in the Humanitarian Networks and Partnership Week in Geneva, in Switzerland, which is hosted by the United Nations. And during our time there, we've seen how powerful storytelling can be in the first perspective. And that's what inspired this festival to begin. So, the goal of our GYP Youth Humanitarian Film Festival is pretty simple, but it's very meaningful. We want to build a platform for young people to express, to discuss, and to learn about humanitarian issues, and also to use film as a bridge to connect empathy and action, and to raise awareness about the humanitarian challenges that we face together as a globe in the world today through the perspective of youth. So for our first year, we've received about 50 short films through Film Freeway and direct submissions. And these films come from across the world, including the United States, China, Brazil, Sri Lanka, Ukraine, Iran, Malaysia, United Kingdom, Italy, and Chile, which showcases an incredible diversity of voices and perspectives. Thank you so much for everyone who submitted to our film festival. And the submissions we received covered a wide range of topics, from poverty to mental health to education, war and peace, and endangered cultures, and so on. So tonight is the start of an entire week of events to celebrate these young voices, these talented filmmakers. And here's what's coming up for us. So tomorrow, Sunday, November 2nd, at 2 p.m. EST Eastern Time, we'll be celebrating African Cultures Day, featuring Ms. Ekwa Msangi, who is the director, writer, and producer with the African Film Festival. And we'll also be hearing from Mr. George, who is a longtime partner with us, Global Youth Philanthropy, who is also the founder and executive director of Education in Crisis, a renowned NGO based in Tanzania, dedicated to advancing inclusive education across East Africa. And everyone's welcome to join using the same Zoom link that we are using today. And on November 3rd, Monday, our student leader, David, will be hosting an interview with filmmaker Wesley Wang, who is a Harvard student and a 2023 Best Overall winner at the American High School Film Festival. And during that interview, he will share with everyone his experience creating his film, Nothing Except Everything, which he created during his senior year. And he will talk about the journey from high school filmmaking to rising professional. And from November 4th to 6th, we will be hosting a series of award-winning film screening. And all of these screening links can be requested by emailing info@globalyouthphilanthropy.org. And surely I'll also share this email in the chat. And finally, in the upcoming week, we'll be hosting Zoom interviews with this year's winners. So please stay in tune on our website and newsletters. And tonight, we also want to take a moment to thank the many, many people and institutions who made this event possible and this festival possible. And to share those special appreciations and to introduce our award guests, please welcome my co-chair, Mo-Ling Wang.
All right, hello everyone. Again, thank you so much for participating in this meeting and event today. My name is Mullen and I am the co-host for this meeting, and I am also a GYP board member. So I will be giving a special appreciations to our honorable guests that will be joining us today. And I will be sharing my screen. Just one moment. Okay. There, I wonder if everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, just one moment, please. I'll take this here. Wait, this is not working. Okay. Okay. So as for our honorable guest today, as of beforehand, I would like to state the fact that we have such a large diversity here joining our meeting today. So if I ever pronounce your name wrong, I deeply apologize, and you're fully free to correct me every time I pronounce it wrong or any word that you want. Okay. And for our honorable award announcing guest, we have Nicholas Nalo, who is Associate Program Director of Film and Television from Drexel University and College of Media Arts and Design. Welcome. And our second honorable award announcing guest, Mr. Long Chu from the University of Hong Kong. I would also like to give a special appreciation to the 13 college students from Drexel University for helping as film judges. Okay, welcome everyone for joining the meeting today. And as an introduction of our award, after more than a month of evaluations, the 2025 GYP Youth Humanitarian Film Festival selected a total of the following awards. So how we structure the awards is that we have different age groups and levels. As for age groups, we have the special group, the junior division, and the senior division. As for levels, we have both silver and gold, and ultimately our grand prize winner. So we have selected two GYP Filmmaker Special Awards produced by students younger than 13 under the guidance of parents or mentors. We have also selected one GYP Rising Filmmaker Award Silver level from filmmakers aged 13 to 18, which are the junior division. Three GYP Emerging Filmmaker Award from the silver level from filmmakers aged 19 to 25 of the senior division. We have three GYP Rising Filmmaker Award gold from filmmakers aged 13 to 18 of the junior division, and four GYP Emerging Filmmaker Award golds from those who are aged 19 to 25 of the senior division. And finally, we have our one GYP Jury Grand Prize, the festival's top honor chosen from all injuries. So before I go on to my actual announcements, I would like to ask anyone, the filmmaker.
Okay, Williams, I turn this to you.
All right, I didn't realize I was muted just now. Sorry. So that was our event yesterday, which was hosted by fellow board members Lucy and Moling. And so today we'll be discussing you guys are going to be discussing. So Miss Ekwa Msangi and George Omar Nalo, they'll be talking about African culture, filmmaking, and how those two intertwine. So if one of you would Miss Ekwa Msangi start by talking to us about it?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. My name is Ekwa. I am a writer, director, producer. Have been based in New York City for many years, just recently moved to Boston, where I teach screenwriting at Emerson College now. And grew up my family's from Tanzania, actually, where Mr. Nalo is based. However, I grew up in Kenya as a young person, and that's where I became inspired to become a filmmaker because of the lack of local programming that was available to me as a young person growing up there at that time. All of our programming was imported, mostly British shows and radio things, and as a foreigner, sort of a Tanzanian living in Kenya, but just as an East African surrounded by very interesting, colorful people. We'd have relatives who'd cross the border. Kenya and Tanzania are bordering countries. We'd have relatives who'd come and visit and tell us stories about, what was going on and what was happening in the family. And there were just these amazing, larger than life tales of, things that were happening in our family. And I never got to see any of that reflected on TV or on screens or in media or any of the things around me. Most of the films that were shown had nothing to do with my life or my culture, or just was completely oblivious of our existence. East Africa is also a place where, despite not having a whole lot of local programming at that time, things have changed now. We've had some of the oldest cinema on the continent. We've had big Hollywood movies that have been shot in East Africa since the 1930s and 40s, where big productions would come and use that as a location. But most of those films were about white people sort of discovering themselves and finding their joy in their lives and their loves and, all of those things against the backdrop of the animals and the savannah and a few smattering of Black people sort of bouncing around in the background. And so there was never any focus on the people and the stories that actually lived there. And so as a young teenager, I remember feeling very frustrated by that, by never being able to see myself reflected anywhere. I suppose it's similar to, if you could imagine growing up in the US and all of your programming is in like Dutch or something. It's like, I'm sure that's great, Dutch life is lovely, but it's weird to, be familiar with Dutch prom and Dutch romances and, after school jobs and sort of like what Dutch kids do every day and never see yourself or your language or, you know, any of your culture reflected back to you is odd. And it's not natural. And for people who African people are natural storytellers, we're oral historians. We always have been. Um, Most people know about music culture because that's something that's traveled widely for centuries. But as far as images are concerned, you know, it's one of the places that, um, because of how powerful images are, um, it's a place that's been very tightly controlled, especially in that time in the 80s and 90s, which was, you know, about 20 years post-colonialism. It was very strategic for countries, for governments, and for foreign governments, Western governments, to colonize the media and to control what we are able to access and not. And so I came to New York as a teenager. Spike Lee was the one Black filmmaker I'd ever heard of. I saw one of his films on a late night screening in Kenya, and they mentioned that he was Black, and I didn't really understand what the film was about, but I was excited that there was a Black filmmaker somewhere in the world, and I just decided to read everything that I could find about him and what he did, and he went to NYU, so I was like, I'm going to NYU. And I got into NYU and studied film at a time when we were making film on actual celluloid. This was pre-digital, pre-YouTube, you know, so the distribution mechanisms of how films are shared were also, I mean, still are very colonized, but much differently than they are now, you know, with the internet. This was basically pre-internet, or the internet as we know it, I should say. And so still being able to make stories, but at that time, it was still the challenge of how do you share? How do I get to see what's going on in different places? And the first place actually that, at least for me, that I got to see other parts of the continent even, including neighboring countries. I mean, I'm from Tanzania. I would tell my friends in Kenya about what my life was like, or what my cousins were like, or what the family holiday was like in the neighboring country. Because at that time, even living in Kenya, you couldn't see what was going on in Tanzania. People had no idea what we were listening to, or what the fashion sense was like, or what any of that is. And the first time we were able to actually see that was really after um, the end of apartheid in South Africa, where they started opening up their version of MTV, which was Channel O, and we got to see music videos from Southern Africa, and it was just like so dope. Wow, you know, we got to see what they were grooving to and listen to their music and sort of mimic their dance styles. And now that's a very common thing. And as you can see, even on TikTok, like we do that all over the world now. But it was mind blowing at the time to even imagine, you know, what was happening literally right next door. And to be able to have synergy and have conversations back and forth. So people were making responses to other people's songs and in their videos. And so that was a kind of like the first form of filmmaking, and I think youth-led filmmaking that I can think of that really starting to change how people were having conversations within their stories. So it wasn't just representing my little corner of the continent and sort of what we're about, but also keeping in reference what was happening elsewhere. Because the other thing about colonization, or coming out of colonization, a post-colonial environment, is that the ways in which media was controlled also differed between the ex-colonies. So the Francophone countries did have much more of a cinema culture where there were big theaters, and local people would regularly go to the theaters to watch movies in Burkina Faso, in Senegal, in Congo, even, and you know, a lot of the North African countries, Tunisia, Morocco, etc. because they had French funding that would support local filmmaking. Whereas in the Anglophone countries, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, to some degree Tanzania as well, we didn't have a cinema culture. We had more of a TV culture, and most of our TV programming was imported. And so less of a culture of people going to theaters to converse and have conversations in that way. But, a lot more technology. So, when digital technology came into play, a lot of, as you have maybe heard of Nollywood, that's a community that has really taken off specifically with digital culture, and have sort of been a pioneer and have created or inspired mini Nollywoods all over the continent. So every country has their version of Nollywood. Tanzania, it's called Bongo Wood. Rwanda has Hillywood. I can't remember the other names, but everyone sort of has their little twist on how we do local um, like not programming, but local filmmaking, and the conversations that people are having. Uganda has a very big, they were using a lot of like really early special effects. I mean, you can tell that they're special effects, but they're like action movies, and that's sort of like what they're known for. And the Nigerians have a lot of melodrama kind of stuff, and everybody has their thing, and has their celebrity cultures and their sort of hierarchy within that. Um, the woods. Um, uh, and then there's the folks who are sort of, I guess maybe I should say, outward facing filmmakers who are making films for international film festivals or for cinema that are supposed to show in movie theaters as opposed to show on TV or DVDs. Um, and that's a little slower because it requires a lot more money and a lot more foreign support and things of that nature. But there are a lot of people who are coming up and who are making really important work and reflecting on our times and sort of what's going on. And there's a lot going on the continent. And a lot of people are feeling that, like the music scene, which has taken off globally all over the world, film is supposed to be uh, the next big thing coming out of Africa, in terms of the ways that we tell stories and sort of bend narrative telling and the use of technology, for people who never really had access or easy access to a lot of these things. And people are just sort of coming up with new and interesting ways to use it. It's been a really interesting place to be. So in my career, I've had the privilege of working on the continent and in the US, and very interested in sort of keeping connected to the continent because I feel like that's where a lot of um, the most interesting ideas are coming out of right now. And I'll stop there.
All right, thank you, Ms. Msangi, for sharing your experiences with us. I do have a lot of questions. However, I'll save those for after George has presented as well, so that we can have like a whole group kind of discussion. Yeah.
Sounds good.
So, Mr. George Omar Nalo, do you want to like give a little presentation about what your background is, what you want to do, what your goal is?
Sure. 谢谢你，我的名字是赵宇。Do you get me a little bit?
Yeah, I
so
understand. It's very good, very good.
yeah, so thank you so much for welcoming me, and I am really grateful for this space, as always, with the Global Youth Philanthropy. I know a little bit of Mandarin, but I am not so perfect because, when you're not committed to something, then you don't get it so well. So, but I know I will perfect it. So I am originally from Sudan. So I'm just based right now in Tanzania because of the work of the organization. Of course, I've been here in Tanzania since 2016. So I came when I didn't know anything like Swahili. So I started to pick up, and today at least I can really, somebody can easily fail to know whether I am a Tanzanian. Yeah, but I am a Sudanese. And of course, I am so happy to be here today and to present on especially the issue of African Day, African Child Day that Michael had shared with me some time back. Yeah, I met Michael and the team at this year's Humanitarian Network Week at Geneva, but online. I was not able to make it physically there. So we entered into discussion and we became partners. And Global Youth Philanthropy now supports 4 students in Sudan on a scholarship. And we are very happy for the support and especially sharing this global solidarity. As some of you may know, Sudan is now the world's worst humanitarian crisis with more than 24 million people displaced internally and externally. And of course, it is the worst education crisis region also, whereby at least more than 19 million children are out of school at the moment. And so we are operating in some of the world's most fragile areas as education in crisis. So my name is George Omer Nalo, and the Director of Education in Crisis. I founded this organization in 2019 when I failed to join university because of lack of support. And yeah, I tried to mobilize people around the world, and most specifically the Africans. I have been telling them, and I still tell them, that for us as Africans, no one is coming to save us. No one is coming to help. We are the very ones to first step forward and do what we want, the change that we want to drive to see in the continent. And so that's how I started the organization, trying to let others take charge of their own problems and bring on their solutions to solve their own challenges. And so when we talk about the African Culture Day, or the stories we can link with the filmmaking and the social media, that is a serious kind of transformation the world has seen in these days. Because of course, there are people who have lived more experiences, like my sister Ekwa. She has known more when it comes to working in this field, but I'm just speaking about my work, what I do and how relating it is. Those years, no one could easily even know what is happening in the UK, in Sudan, in Gaza, in any other part of the world, as she mentioned about her experience living in Kenya and all this. That was how hard it was to know what was happening in your neighboring country or your neighbor. But today, the social media, the technology has made it so much easier for us. Now, even I can speak to you just from very many kilometers away from you. And so, yet, at least we have more people in Africa at the moment who do not have access to internet, because it's still kind of a luxury. In Tanzania at the moment, we could have not faced some challenges of not having internet if there were enough innovations to own this internet locally. But because there are limited opportunities, maybe limited capacities, or maybe there could be capacities, but there's limited way the local people can have not been able to explore ways to make their own changes and maybe bring internet. For example, you look at Starlink. Starlink is one of great innovations in internet, whereby it's a bit not restricted and you can access it anywhere. And I mean, so because the governments still control a lot when it comes to propaganda, the information sharing and all this, it has become so incredibly difficult for African youth, especially in context of fragile areas, to have access to some kind of this kind of technologies or something of the sort. So filmmaking brings the hidden stories that the world could not have had easily into life, into screens. Of course, those days, the Africans, I am born of 1998, so I am not that much, I can't speak so much about like 90s and all this because maybe I was now ushered in 2000. And so those stories come now into my mind, and I know what happened those days. But I want to believe that before that, before my birthday, maybe we used to, the Africans, this telling of the story, as she said, it's more of oral. I think Africans are very much into oral talking. Unfortunately, no one has been paying attention almost in documenting these oral stories. That's how we are studying European history, because I studied history, African history and European history, and at my A level. So majorly you study things that were written by foreigners, not Africans themselves. They heard from Africans. They took this information somewhere, they drafted these books, and they sent them back in their own narratives now, so that we can consume the content they want us to consume. And that's how bad it is for the continent at the moment, that the true independence actually lies in the mind. If your mind is truly independent, you can be able to innovate, you can solve your own problem. But that lack of kind of independence, individual independence among the Africans, is what ties us seriously back to the Western world and to every kind of colonialism. Yes, it ended, but I don't think it did. It still has more roots, and even this time more difficult, because Marcus Garvey, one of great African kind of Africanist, is in 1990s when he introduced the term the mental slavery. It is what exactly still it's us as Africans, for us to be able to break free from that mental slavery, the victimhood, where you feel the education is not good because I don't know, I am still poor because I was colonized by Europe, by all this. So that victimhood is still that thing that is keeping the Africans away from this. And now to change this kind of narratives, I think when Africans are empowered, especially in this kind of humanitarian perspective, whereby we're looking at empowering individuals to take charge of their own kind of future, or to take charge of their own lives, to write their own stories and bring them to life. People with critical skills like Ekwa are the ones to now try to guide and then even make these stories make more meaning, because that background you have, my sister, is very strong. That somebody now like an African, I feel so honored to meet you, to have the same space with you, because I mean, you have lived the experience, and now you know what it means, where you come from and where you're heading, and possibly the legacy you're leaving behind in your work that you're doing. So for me, that is how empowerment could have done to us as Africans, and especially to the youth, the young people, so that they're able to rewrite their own history using their own lived experiences, and this time with their own narratives, not someone now imposing there. Because you people come here, record videos, record a lot of things, but then when they go back, they edit certain things that they don't want them to be appearing that they are from Africa, because it appears to be great, and then they don't want that greatness to be maybe linked to Kenya, linked to Tanzania, linked to a certain country in Africa, because it means like there's nothing that comes from such, and yet it's not. So I believe today we are able to link up because of these kind of opportunities the technology has also bridged. And I believe that with our work and the work of the Global Youth Philanthropy, we have a role to play. First of all, to give the voice to the voiceless, and to give a platform to those without one, and also to bring meaning, or to give meaning to the stories that we hear from people who are suffering around the world. For example, Sudan, the stories of the children going hungry and all this. We have the opportunity now to give meaning to these stories, whereby somebody in Boston, someone in somewhere is able to listen to this story, is able to follow you up, is able to verify this, and is able to maybe even take an action of supporting or empowering this individual. I mean, we could talk all the day, but I think for me, social media part is very important because what we do, for example, in Sudan, in Tanzania, or South Sudan, wherever we are doing anything, when we put our story out there, someone is able to come across it. Now, that is in our small way, how we can, what we are able to do. What about when there are maximum kind of support systems that we have in place? There are people believing in what you're doing, and they provide you the tools. For example, I think Michael, I don't know, I hope Michael is here. So one of the most powerful things that could come out of here, I know you are small and we are also small, but in our smallness, you see that we can be very powerful. We need to uh, document serious stories. With us being on ground, I think it is important because we have people with knowledge, with serious knowledge, I can say, uh, like Ekwa, and many others whom we could still reach out. When we make stories, the real stories, because I know sometimes some people believe the stories they hear, they're kind of fiction and all this, but we need to strengthen this film festival. We need to strengthen it as much as possible because you have people on ground like us who have the real stories as well. Personally, I authored a book, I call it, or it is Imagine Being George. It's a story of how in 2012 I left my country and during the time of war, and I started my journey to Uganda, where I got my education. I am to 2018 when I got done with my high school. But because in 2019 I couldn't join university, I came up with this organization thinking that I can help others who have or who may have the same challenges like me. Luckily, in 2020, I took myself back to university and I graduated from Makerere University, which is also one of Africa's best universities. So such stories, when I put it in a book, you see the fiction is not there because I am the story. I am living this story and I have lived the story. So I think if we as the partners come together, I am very sure we will get other people to support what we do. Maybe if we just record and we don't know how to produce this film, they can help. If we don't have the support that we need to maybe reach a certain place, they can support. I believe that coming together like this will drive this action so that the youth around the world are able to take action by themselves and produce something that they believe can empower their own communities. Because today, when I go back to Sudan and I speak about what I am doing, this year alone in February, I came back, I went back and I brought together 100 Sudanese in my community and I told them one thing. I am back and I want us to be the first responders to what is happening. What are we going to do? We want to send 100 children back to school. So these 100 children, there's someone in the United States, there's someone in Uganda, there's someone somewhere is going to see that is our effort. That's what we are able to do. And they're going to come in. So with their $30, with their, I don't know how much, whatever they are going to come in. So what are we going to do? We are going to donate a symbolic $100 to support at least 100 children. So each one of you will be paired with a child. So mine is here. My $100 is here. 100 Sudanese from my community donated. That is $10,000, which we could write to ask somebody in Europe, and we take 2 years to get it. And of course, these are things that once we just come up and we empower individuals, the individuals are empowered. I am very sure the narrative, the film-making festival, we will make it so much more, very, very much consumed by the people, owned by the people of such a community. My dream was this, when Michael shared this with me, I wanted to host this on ground in the Nuba Mountains, for example, in Sudan, to show people that we are in war zone area, but we have people who are actually with us on ground. Of course, like you guys, you're with us on ground with your spirit, but the body is far, but the spirit is with us. And that's the most important thing. That's how you participated in the on June 16th day of the African Child. So that is how powerful it is today to bridge that gap, to tell someone that I'm very far, but I still can do something with you. I can still participate in any way. So when I saw that we are not able to do it because looking at the time and we had also just come out of an event, I am thinking of next year, what it can be done, how it can be done and how we can do it. I hope I'm not going beyond my minutes. So, and if I'm not, yeah, thank you. So, but I want to just conclude by saying that we have a saying that goes that a story goes further than someone could walk or the legs, where the legs can take you. When you hear about my story and you're in America right now, I mean, it would have taken me years to reach to the United States just to tell you about myself. But at least when I tell you from the comfort of my zone, where I am, and even in the most difficult places, you're able to hear it. You're able to hear my voice. No filters, nothing, just natural joy, the way you see me. So that is the human connection that a story creates that those days was lacking. We would sit near or around the fireplace, and our grandparents or elders in African setting, of course, would tell you the story of how they fought in a war or how they went for hunting and they brought back the meat and the community celebrated. But today, these fireplaces are actually our screens, the phones we have, the laptops, the TVs, all this, that is a fireplace now we have. A fireplace that's not just being enjoyed by people around Africa or in a certain community, but somebody very far, we are now sitting at around a fireplace. So, I mean, we have so much to do as a global kind of people united under one common goal of trying to help and transform the humanity. And I'm sure with the right kind of support and guidance, we can really transform this world. And I believe we have the platform to always see how we can do. We have what it takes. What it just always must be there is the will. Are we able to do something? Are we willing to do something? Are we able to put something into action? So, and I want to end my discussion here. And thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, George. Yeah.
But your story is actually like very like this is the first time I'm actually like hearing of a actual person in front of me who has gone through like this struggle of having a block in your education, but then you powered through it and you pursued your education in university and got a degree. It's like very inspirational for me. I think like that's actually like something wide eye-opening. Like sorry for like stuttering. It's just like it's a lot of information to process and it's like a very nice story, just like very beautifully put. And yeah, all right. So basically, I want to open up the round to like discussion. If any of you guys have any questions, if you don't, I do have a question. So to either of Mr. Msangi or George, so you mentioned how there was a lot of like Western media or Western programs that was available to you guys when you guys were growing up. So like what misconceptions or about like Africa or Sudan do you still think exists due to that? And how has the introduction of African films to the outside world changed that perspective? Is any of you have a
It's hard to even mention like one or two things. I mean, you know, as Mr. George so eloquently put it about like decolonizing the mind, that's sort of the main thing. So, and it looks a lot of different ways. You know, there's confidence in self-aesthetics, you know, beauty standards. You know, what your life is supposed to look like versus, you know, because somebody in Hollywood said, and you know, and that's one of the things that's true even here in the US is that there are people who grew up in the 90s watching the Cosby Show and everyone was like, oh, you know, it's normal or you're supposed to have sort of your dad's a doctor, your mom's a lawyer, you live in a fancy brownstone in some part of Brooklyn, and that wasn't reflective of most people's existence. And it, it kind of made it seem like, well, if you're not doing that, then you must be doing something wrong. And so that's kind of like a similar thing that I've seen with, and with the barrage of media that we still consume through social media, etc., of sort of like what your life should look like. Now, it's in terms of like I was mentioning the power of music on the continent, and a lot of R&B hip hop music. The aesthetic of it is borrowed from American hip hop um, aesthetics, which is about sort of riches and sort of how successful I am, how well I'm doing, how many girlfriends I have, how many, the wealth and the sort of commodities that is owned. And that's not true for most people. However, it's not necessarily that everybody across, from wall to wall is sort of given into that. That's just that's just the things that we're fighting against. I'm very well aware of, like in hip hop in particular, there are places, Senegal being an example that I am familiar with, where hip hop is very political, and a lot of like the big hip hop artists who work from there don't absolute, like nobody will take you seriously if you're there talking about your cars and your bling bling, like they need to be addressing sort of what's happening with the people. I've seen that even in Angola, where there's a lot of very fun music that just sounds sort of like joyful party music, but it's young people talking about the effects of civil war and domestic violence and, not having enough money or empowerment, or, how that Angola, Luanda, which is the capital city, is one of the most expensive cities in the world, to live in because of, Angola is also home to diamonds and gas and, just a lot of natural resources that are, there's a lot of politics involved as to why people don't have access to that wealth, as is true here as well. So anyways, I guess to answer your question, in my opinion, I think that the decolonization of the mind is still very much in effect. And while there's a lot of progress that has been made, there's a lot more empowerment than, say, when I was a child. There is still a lot of work to do because the media, we're not just talking about one or two TV stations. It's now, social media, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the TikToks, the like whatever, all over the world. And, and there's a lot of these companies that it's very like they need to continue having the mind colonized in order to be able to extract all the resources, human resources and natural resources that they continue to do. And so, so it's an active battle.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. I think I like see where you're getting at, and I see that as well, like the cultural aspect of things and how like social media has perpetuated kind of like an idealized version of how we should be living as opposed to the reality of how a lot, like the majority of the population is actually living. And so like Mr. Nalo, do you have anything to add on to that, or any like other opinions about the current, I guess, outlook on what the Africa or the life is like?
Sure. I think a little bit sad because it's on negative part. The African culture has been negatively influenced with the kind of content that comes from which is imported. It's supposed to be where we could transform ourselves, and maybe somebody hears a story, maybe it empowers you, it challenges you to do something better for yourself and all this. But then my observation has been that the content maybe is a little bit censored, whereby it targets different consumers with a different kind of priority needs. And that's why today the African youth largely rely on trying to portray what happens in the United States, what happens in the UK, what happens in Canada, what happens in China, and all this, instead of doing trying to do what the Chinese have done is to modernize their culture. What Americans have done is to modernize their culture. What Africans should be doing also is to modernize their culture. And so that could have been something more helpful, because today we are not talking about great innovations or great stories ever told on African continent. Maybe some of the most successful stories on the continent could be my story, because I believe I am one African person who has lived the story and actually is trying to do what I wanted to see in Africa. If it is learning, if it's going to school to get access to education, and then you use it to transform your people, that's what I wanted to see. I didn't want to go to Australia in 2016. I got everything to go there. Somebody actually did that for me. They wanted me to go there, get education, and I started working. But I declined, and up to today, this person he was one of the first person who bought my book. Because it was like, I mean, you refused in 2016 to come to Australia because you wanted to feel at home, to be at home. And maybe some years later, I have seen practically what you're doing. So for me, the perspectives that have changed a little bit more negative than the positive perspectives. Yes, it's true. I agree that there are more open ways the stories are making it to the screens. There are more people acting. But then when you clearly look at it, because I'm actually telling you this is from raw kind of reaction or review, which I've clearly seen. If you try to look at what is happening, someone trying to do something on TikTok, someone is trying to, they are portraying not a story they are living. They're trying to portray a story someone else is living. And that is where I feel we could have come in and maybe even show some of the most successful stories that should be making the headlines instead of what is happening at the moment. So for me, negative kind of publicity and all this content creation, I think it's more kind of narrative based, where someone wants something to be done according to a certain interest they want. And of course, it all goes to politics, as Ms. Ekwa has mentioned. That is what happens here in Africa, whereby almost everything is politicized. And yes, I don't want to discuss more about that because it will take me to a deeper discussion.
So I'd like to ask Ekwa something. As you were like in the earlier steps of your film journey, like when you began to study film, was there like a specific filmmaker you looked up to and think like, I want to be like them in the future? Like how have they like inspired you?
It's a great question. Well, as I mentioned, Spike Lee was the one Black filmmaker that I'd heard of. And so while I didn't, but culturally, I didn't quite understand the topics that he was discussing in his films. I mean, I enjoyed what I saw, and I think my first film of his that I saw was School Days, which is kind of a musical. And I grew up in the next British colony. We did a lot of musicals, so I got that part of it. But I wouldn't say that I wanted to be a filmmaker like or make films like him. I wanted to just be a filmmaker as he was a filmmaker, and used him as an example. But because I didn't grow up watching a lot of films that I loved, um, I never really, unlike a lot of my peers, who went to school because they were inspired by, The Godfather or Steven Spielberg or whoever, like there are all these names that inspired my peers, young peers at that time to become filmmakers. I was kind of the opposite. I was inspired by the lack of that. I was inspired and frustrated um, by just how terrible the films that we saw were, because I mean, at the time, I think I remember in the 80s, just sort of keeping in mind the age group that you are, so you may not be familiar with these people, but Sylvester Stallone had a movie called Rambo, which was a big deal. And it kind of played on loop for about 10 years. I mean, we saw like every version of Rambo, and then there were all these knockoff films that are I'm interested in sort of getting to the bottom of where these films come from. There are a number of films that are made in the West specifically for foreign markets and for, I think, non-English speaking markets, even though we're English speaking. And so they're kind of like super, super cheap action movies. And when I mean super cheap, I mean the kinds of things where like you hear the gunshots, or rather you see the people falling and then you hear the gunshots afterwards, like it's like really, really goofy. Um, and it's like the stories are like really goofy and see-through. And none of these people are stars anywhere that you'd find. And it's all very questionable, like why these films were made in the first place. A lot of propaganda, probably. So I grew up watching a lot of those. That's what was available, and I hated them. I hated them passionately. And so I came to school with sort of like the mindset of like, I hate that and I want to make something better. Like I know I can make something better. And now I have people who I emulate or whose work that I enjoy. Obviously Ryan Coogler, Steve McQueen, um, Ava DuVernay. Those are some of the people whose work I adore, and who inspired me in a lot of different ways, artistically and otherwise, and just like how they've been able to make space for their communities, or the communities that they represent and the stories that they represent. But as a younger person, unfortunately, I didn't really have that because of the circumstances under which I came to film.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. So to one final question, I guess for both of our speakers is lighthearted, I guess. So like, what was like the first movie, film, or like short video you saw that and you thought like, wow, I see myself in my culture being represented in that like film or like media? Because I noticed that you two have mentioned again the programs that the West has made to depict their portion of life, but you guys never really got to see your identity being reflected in these films as you guys were growing up. So like, what was the first movie that you saw and you were like, wow, I see myself in that film? Or to both speakers. So either of you could.
George, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can go. Yeah, I think Black Diamonds, Blood Diamonds movie is one of the toughest movie that I have ever crossed like paths with. Luckily enough, this year in May, I went to Sierra Leone in Freetown, and I was really interested to learn about something I saw many, many years ago as a boy. So Blood Diamonds, of course, is a story which depicts, it's not really a true story. It is a kind of fictional story that, but it was using the real conflict in Sierra Leone to tell a story of how they can get something that existed which is special, and they can use it to actually transform their lives, which means you have to die for it if it has to be done that way. So how an American journalist helped an African man to get access to this and they are able to transform their lives is how I felt that one day I must do something here with the special thing that lies in Africa, and I transform not just my life, but the lives of others. So, if you have ever known me, I am one person when I put something in my mind to, I achieve what I want. Honestly speaking, in 2010, when I watched this movie, I was not even 12 years yet. But today, after almost 13 years or plus, I think I am really living what I wanted to. So by discovering that first I have a potential, and now I have to use this potential to transform other people's life. I mean, this is a movie of Blood Diamond that I literally is trying to transfer to. The difference is that the Blood Diamond movie is a fictional story, and my story is a real one. So I think that's what I can say about this.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very powerful movie. Yeah, about the similar age range as Mr. George here. I think the first film that I saw is a film called Sarafina, which is based on a musical, like actually an off-Broadway or Broadway musical, written and developed by some South African artists, Mbongeni Gema, and I can't remember his partner's name. And it was a telling of the youth uprising that took place in 1976 in South Africa, in Soweto, when the apartheid government was trying to force African schools to be taught in Afrikaans language, which would cut them out from ever being able to. I mean, Afrikaans is a language that's only spoken in South Africa and was only spoken at that time, and they were trying to control their education so that they'd only use Afrikaans, they'd only learn how basically skills to enable them to be domestic laborers and nothing else. And young people went to the streets and were toe to toe with police in like armored vehicles and, I mean, war zone type thing. And it really sort of like pushed into the 80s and, what finally dismantled the apartheid state. But kind of one of the main kernels was this main uprising that took place in 1976. So it was a musical about that then became a movie, sort of a Hollywood movie with Whoopi Goldberg playing, they always have to have an American stars in order to sort of sell it to American investors. And she did great. She was playing a teacher who had been arrested for, siding with justice and freedom. But I saw that they showed that film for 2 weeks in Nairobi when I was about 12 or so. And I remember lining up for 4 hours. I didn't even know what the movie was about, but it was the first time we had seen an African film. So it was like, I'm going to see it, and it's the most beautiful music. And even though, I mean, our situation in Kenya wasn't like that, we weren't facing, armed tanks in the streets at any point, thankfully. But it was just so inspiring to see people my age who effected that kind of change so bravely, and many who lost their lives and then just like the quality of music that comes out of South Africa is unbelievable. So that's always inspiring no matter what the context is. And I remember just sort of feeling like I wanted to be able to tell those kinds of stories and have that kind of power. Not power, like I need that power, but to be able um, to make a story that is so powerful and have that reach audiences across borders, across continents, and have the effect that it did on me, who didn't really even understand what the full context of that story was, but was so affected by it.
All right. Thank you too for sharing your experience.
Yeah, may I ask a last question?
Sure.
Yeah, really appreciate, we have such a good event. Yeah, my last question is, it's open question. I don't know whether you prepare, if you give me some answer, or even follow up after the event, by email. My concern is, our GYP is a student run organization. We pretty much have a lot of young students. You can see our students, they're very excellent student from high school to college, and we get a large percentage second generation Chinese American, but they are willing to learn. So we're planning to do this film festival in the future, like twice a year. So I just wonder, any suggestion you have for us, how this is the first cultural event we have. We're, very uh, happy to have, your guy to help to focus on African culture. We want to do this in the future. So I just want to know any suggestion for JYP as an organization. We try a lot of things. We try to connect some education organize university in the Africa. We try to contact some partner. We also, our student did some online research. We probably will do some systematic collection of all the information. Oh, African related film, what is excellent is okay. Any suggestion you suggest us to do in the future to make our festival better vehicle for cultural understanding?
I think that's a great place for me to think about and get back to you via email, just so
Yeah.
that I'm able to give you a more concise and less just off the top of my head answer. But it's a great question, and I'd love to follow up on that with you.
Oh yeah, it'd be great. You think about give me some follow up.
Sure.
Yeah. How about George?
Yeah, and on my end, I have a suggestion that is, of course, because this is a very, I mean, practical thing that we could do. Personally, I reached to the Students Guild of Makerere University. Unfortunately, they tried to give me another time so that I can get back to them. They can get back to me. And the last time I went, they have exams. They are in the period of exams. And so it was a bit difficult. But I remember one of them told me something, and which I also felt that maybe that is why they wanted maybe to be like that. Physical kind of arrangement with the university, for example, any university in Africa, we make it a hybrid kind of event whereby we can have this kind of practical discussions, maybe with different youth around the world. They can be brought together, because I believe that we can do something. This time when we went to Sierra Leone, we were hosted by the African Union from 37 countries in the world. And they usually do that exhibition and all this. So I believe if we can do something with exhibition kind of this could really transform not just the life of filmmakers, the storytellers, and the communities, no, but the whole perspective of what we are trying to say, to connect different youth in humanitarian context differently, and that would enrich them so much. So if we can be able to set a timeline, maybe some time, first to come up with a plan. The resources will never be a problem because when we reach out to people with the authentic thing that we want to do exactly, and we bring them back the result of what we have done, that creates a very kind of a ripple effect on that. And so we can just do the planning as early as possible, because what I saw, the challenge with this came a little bit with the time constraint, because as I said, from EIC, we had just come out of the event. And so if we wanted to host this, to ask people who have just supported your event that has ended becomes a little bit tricky for another event, which is coming in 2 months ahead. So we got ourselves it was very hard. But then physical events, a little bit with hybrid, are very, very transformative in Africa. Why? The African people have not yet completely seen that kind of migration from that virtual and physical and all this. So that physical touch is still believed in so much, and it is still treasured. And so that's what I could think of. Maybe if we chose a country like Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, according to the context of that time, we can use that, because if you, for example, Uganda, they will be presenting you a Ugandan coffee, or it is Ethiopia, they will present you with Ethiopian coffee, kind of a marking, significant kind of way of celebrating this event. This, I think, would make a lot of impact, according to me. And of course, I can still think of other ways, and of course, follow up through the email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah, I think that was good. We went a little over time, but I think that was like very insightful, honestly. It opened my eyes, I guess, it widened my horizons on what other people's experiences are. And like I think Edwin feels the
Might as
same
well.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah. Thank you for coming here today. I know, George, it's like 11, I think 11 p.m. for you guys. It's pretty late. Yeah, thank you for making time for us. And thank you for Miss Msangi for also making the time for us. And
Sure. Thank you for having
that's it.
us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
George.
Thank you,
It's wonderful to
everybody.
meet you. Wonderful to
You
meet
are.
you all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Okay, bye.
Is that good?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.